What if the president's own cryptocurrency became the backdoor for foreign powers to buy influence in Washington? And what if, while those allegations swirled, one state battled a violent crime rate 5 times the national average and a fentanyl crisis spiraling out of control? In one explosive Senate hearing, these two worlds collided. Senators pressed the Attorney General for answers on foreign money, political favors, and whether America's safety is taking a backseat to politics. What followed wasn't just testimony, it was a battle over the very soul of justice in the United States. It started with a dinner, an exclusive gathering for 220 individuals who had purchased the most of the president's meme coins.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Attorney General. And I'm sorry I wasn't here for the whole hearing, so it's been addressed, but I think you really are very sensitive to the possibility of foreign agents or foreign influence on our government and making sure that we make sure that doesn't happen.
Yes.
Yes. I want to know if when the president held his dinner for 220 individuals who purchased the most of his meme coins, were there foreign interests attending that dinner?
Senator, we're here to talk about the Department of Justice and my budget for the upcoming year. I would think that you would want to talk about the leader of the Sinaloa cartel who was living in Oregon, one of the top leaders. I would think that that's what you would want to talk about with me. When we captured him, he had $3 million cash in his home.
Attorney General, I know that you avoided the same question on the House side, but what we know is that many folks who attended this dinner were buying those coins because they wanted to influence U.S. policy. We had Mr. Javier Selgas, the head of Freight Technology, Inc., who said, I bought $2 million of these coins. I plan to buy $20 million because I want a favor from the president to change the policy regarding freight from Mexico to the United States. This solicitation of investments in his personal product, his meme coin, led to many people who were coming from foreign countries attending that dinner. Don't you think the American people have a right to know? And you said yourself you're very concerned about foreign influence on our government.
Senator, it is wildly offensive that you would accuse President Trump of not protecting American interests in our country when he is the president that has shut down our borders, unlike Joe Biden. President Trump has done everything to make America safe, and you asked me the question, and keep America safe.
Do you
and
know
you're trying to play a gotcha question at a budget hearing when you have murders left and right in your state, violent crimes, and we are doing everything we can to help your liberal state. Whether you're liberal or not, we're going to do everything we can to help the citizens of your state, and you're trying to avoid that because you're trying to play a gotcha question with the President of the United States, and it's not going to work. We're here to talk about our budget for public safety.
I do believe that as the leader of the Department of Justice, you should be concerned about foreign influence. There was obviously a lot of foreign influence and individuals who said they were there for that reason. And so will you appoint a special investigator to make sure that that foreign influence does not affect the policies of the United States of America?
I'm not going to tell you what I will or will not do, other than I will do everything to keep the people of your state safe, even though you don't want to talk about anything to do with your state because of the crime in your state. You also voted no on the Laken-Riley Act. We are doing everything we can to protect the citizens of this country. You also said that President Trump encouraged protest. It was the opposite. He's done everything he can to keep us safe, and he will continue to, as well as the Department of Justice.
It speaks volumes that you won't answer the question about transparency when the president is asking people to invest in his company and his products, and that foreigners are attending these events. I think transparency would be appropriate. Are you going to recommend any ethics guidelines to make sure that foreign influence does not find its way in through the doors of the White House?
How do you characterize foreigners, the illegal aliens that have flowed into our country? Is that who you're talking about? You don't want to talk about them. You don't want to talk about the crime that has gone rampant throughout this country and your state.
Well, you know, these hearings are a chance for us to ask questions, and I assure you I'm engaged in national security in many, many ways. But this also I am concerned about. And let me turn to a different piece of the puzzle, because the president also has another cryptocurrency called USD1. It is a stable coin. There was a request by UAE to produce AI chips that would go to UAE. The National Security Advisor of UAE is also the CEO of MGX. So after that request for those chips occurred, MGX then said, we will buy 2 billion, billion with a B, of the president's coins. And then the president went to the Middle East and said, we will get you those AI chips. Does this sequence of events in which a foreign government asks for a big favor, and we had previously banned these chips to UAE because of the national security concerns. Then they buy $2 billion of the president's coins, and then the president goes to the Middle East and says, we will provide those chips. Does that sequence of events concern you about foreign influence on the United States of America?
The foreign influence on America that I would be concerned about if I were you was the Mexican national that resided in Oregon, who we just arrested, who had 384 pounds of methamphetamine. The foreign individual who I would be concerned about if I were a senator from Oregon is the Honduran drug trafficker who was residing in Portland for distributing fentanyl. The foreign national I would be concerned about if I was a Portland senator, an Oregon senator, is a Mexican national leader of a drug trafficking ring. Another one, fentanyl, firearms, fatal overdoses, all in your state.
You have made your point.
57,700 fentanyl pills and stolen firearms in Oregon. That's what we should work together on, not gotcha questions during a budget hearing.
Let me recognize Senator Merkley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The Attorney General certainly has made the point that she's very concerned about issues that I'm concerned about as well regarding the security of this country. But let the record note that in terms of foreign influence and the sale of foreign influence through the president's coins, she absolutely refuses to respond and instead turns to a whole list of different topics. I think it's important for the leader of the Justice Department of the United States to be very concerned about foreign influence, and I encourage you to take on that topic and not consider it an offense that those of us who are concerned here, Democrats and Republicans, want Americans to make American decisions, not foreign influence being bought through crypto coins.
Senator Murkowski.
Chairman.
The event was pitched as a celebration, but Senator Merkley wanted to know who exactly had been in the room. Specifically, had foreign nationals been invited? And if so, why? His concern wasn't abstract. He pointed to public statements from industry figures like the CEO of Freight Technology, who boasted about spending millions on these coins with the expectation of influencing U.S. policy on freight movement between Mexico and the United States. In Merkley's view, this wasn't just a dinner. It was potentially a transactional moment where access to power was being sold in exchange for policy shifts, something that would pierce the firewall meant to protect American decision-making from foreign influence. The Attorney General's response was immediate but not direct. Instead of confirming or denying the presence of foreign interests, she pivoted sharply. She brought up the Sinaloa cartel leader living in Oregon who had been captured with $3 million in cash. She spoke about violent crimes, about border security, and about how this administration, unlike the previous one, had shut down illegal entry points. It was an attempt to reframe the conversation from one about ethics and transparency to one about law enforcement toughness. Merkley, however, wasn't interested in the pivot. He moved to his second example, a case he framed as even more alarming. A foreign government, the United Arab Emirates, had requested advanced AI chips that the United States had previously banned from export to them for national security reasons. The National Security Advisor of UAE also happened to be the CEO of a company called MGX. After making the request, MGX committed to purchasing $2 billion, yes billion with a B worth of the president's cryptocurrency. Shortly after, the president visited the Middle East and announced the U.S. would be sending those AI chips after all. Merkley laid out the sequence step by step, letting the implication hang in the air. Was this a quid pro quo, where a foreign government's massive financial investment in the president's personal coin paved the way for a reversal of U.S. policy? Bondi's reply followed the same pattern as before. She did not engage with the specific allegation. Instead, she rattled off a series of recent busts involving foreign nationals in Oregon, Honduran traffickers, Mexican cartel leaders, fentanyl seizures, illegal firearms. In her telling, these were the real foreign influences the country should be worried about. It was a rhetorical tug-of-war. On one side, Merkley was pushing for transparency on potential corruption and influence buying at the very top. On the other, Bondi was insisting the priority had to be on the operational side, catching criminals, stopping drugs and securing borders. This clash revealed two very different visions of what the Department of Justice should be. Merkley's position was rooted in the idea that without strong ethical safeguards, the entire system risks being compromised from within. Bondi's approach placed emphasis on immediate enforcement priorities, framing questions about political optics as distractions from the day-to-day work of keeping people safe. Then the tone of the hearing shifted. Senator Lisa Murkowski took the floor, and the conversation moved away from Washington intrigue to the hard realities of life in Alaska. Her concerns were concrete and immediate. Between 2022 and 2023, fentanyl deaths in her state had risen by over 40%, even as other states saw declines. Alaska's violent crime rate stood at a staggering 540% of the national average. These weren't abstract statistics, they represented lives lost, families torn apart, and communities living in fear. Murkowski's worry was that federal resources were being pulled into immigration enforcement at the expense of combating violent crime and drug trafficking. She described stories from her constituents, like a local restaurant owner who had lived in the community for decades, whose children were fully integrated, yet was swept up in immigration actions while major trafficking networks still operated freely. For Alaskans, the fear wasn't about meme coins or foreign policy shifts. It was about whether the federal government was keeping its focus on the threats tearing through their neighborhoods. Bondi's response this time was more cooperative. She assured Murkowski that violent crime was not, and would not be, deprioritized. She pointed to the 39 indictments in Alaska under Operation Take Back America in just the last 4 months, promising that more cases were underway. She announced plans to add 2 more FBI agents to the state, with discussions already happening about further staffing increases. She acknowledged the unique challenges Alaska faced, from geographic isolation and harsh weather to limited resources and the complexities of tribal justice systems. And she committed to visiting the state herself to see the situation firsthand, as well as coordinating with a new U.S. Marshal to ensure Alaska had the tools it needed. The contrast between the exchanges was stark. With Merkley, the focus was on the ethical crisis, the possibility that personal financial ventures by a sitting president could be used as channels for foreign influence. With Murkowski, the focus was on the public safety crisis, the reality of fentanyl's devastating reach, and the grinding work of combating violent crime. Both were, in their own ways, threats to public trust. One undermined confidence in governance, the other in the government's ability to protect its citizens. And yet they were connected by a common thread. Public trust isn't just about believing your leaders are honest, it's also about believing they can keep you safe. A Department of Justice that can't prevent private enrichment from corrupting policy is no more legitimate than one that can't stop drugs and violence from ravaging communities. The hearing exposed just how hard it is to balance those imperatives. Total transparency and total security are both essential, but they can also pull in different directions. Focusing too much on one can leave the other vulnerable. In Merkley's eyes, ignoring ethical vulnerabilities in favor of short-term enforcement risks creating a government that's secure but compromised. In Bondi's framing, dwelling on political optics risks leaving communities exposed to immediate dangers. Neither concern is trivial. And in today's political climate, where every move is amplified, scrutinized, and spun, finding space to address both can feel impossible. But that's the challenge the DOJ faces every single day, pursuing accountability without undermining its own capacity to enforce the law, and enforcing the law without sacrificing the transparency that keeps democracy credible. This Senate hearing wasn't just a policy discussion. It was a snapshot of a larger struggle, how to govern in an age where influence can be bought with digital coins and lives can be lost to a few milligrams of fentanyl. It asked whether the institutions meant to protect the public can adapt to threats that are both technological and deeply human. It showed that the fight for integrity and the fight for safety are not separate battles, but two fronts in the same war for public trust. As the session closed, the questions lingered. Would the allegations about cryptocurrency and foreign influence ever get a full public accounting? Would Alaska get the resources it needs to turn the tide on its violent crime and drug epidemic? And more broadly, could the DOJ prove that it can meet its dual mandate to uphold justice both in principle and in practice, without letting one priority eclipse the other? The stakes couldn't be higher, because when the public stops believing that justice is fair or that justice is effective, the very foundation of democracy begins to crack. And in this hearing, those cracks were visible, running through both the marble halls of Washington and the snowbound streets of Alaska. If you've been following this story, you know these aren't just political talking points. They're questions about how power is used, who it serves, and whether it can be trusted at all. So here's where I'll leave you. What do you think is the greater danger right now? The slow corrosion of ethics at the top, or the immediate threat of crime and violence on the ground? Drop your thoughts below, because this conversation is far from over.